Now for user access creation, usually what we speak of is when a user gets a new user ID, right? And when that happens, it's usually when there's a new starter. When there's a new starter. In other case, when I spoke of role modification, if you remember just a few minutes back, in some cases, what if your ID is deactivated from that department, and then your ID is reactivated for the other one, right? In some cases, what I've seen from my experience is that they would, straight away delete that for some reason. Again, not a good practice from a hygiene perspective, but again, they would delete the IDs from a certain department, and then they would recreate the IDs for a different department, or for if they are moving departments, or if they are moving cities or countries in that sense, right? So in those cases as well, you would see that they would follow your user access creation or sort of new user process in that sense, right? Now, largely to keep the conversation maybe narrowed and focused and sort of, in terms of ease of understanding and whatnot, let's take an example of new starter, right? Now, whenever a new starter joins the organization, they would have to go through the, user access creation process and, sort of background verification, getting your confidentiality and sort of NDA signed by yourself, and then submitted it to the HR and whatnot, right? Now, when all the processes are completed and when everything's done as per the policy, again, we refer back to company policy. If you ask me about, in terms of ITGC, what's the best practice and what is the industry best practices, what I would tell you is that it's all dependent on the company policy, right? So we look back to the company policy, whatever the policy says, we audit against that, right? Uh, so we'll look for the company policy. So if the company policy says that you would have your background check, your background verification should be completed before you're provided with your workstation, laptops, or your IDs, accounts, whatever, then obviously they would have to go with the background verification first. However, in all practicality, in the real world, it takes a bit of a time, to be honest, right? It takes about 60, in some cases I've seen 45 to 70 days um, to get your BGV report, and it's a lot of time on top of your notice period, and a number of other logistical problems for you to join the firm, and then you get your workstation and whatnot, right? But yeah, coming to the point is just that when a new starter joins, they have a date of joining, right? They would have a date of joining. Now, once we have the date of joining, so say that I'm just taking a random example here, right? So say that the date of joining is 16th of March 2024, right? That was my date of joining. Now, ideally speaking, I should only have access to the workstation. I should only have access to the IDs or workstations or accounts or whatever it is, right? Or accounts after 16th of March, on or after 16th of March, right? I should only have access to anything on and after 16th of March. However, in the background, what could have happened is that my ID, my account, and my n number of other approvals would have come by 12th of March, right? By 12th of March. But in that sense, you would see that, and I think most of you would have already experienced this, that once you join the firm, you would have to change your password on your first logon. Change your password on your first logon, right? So in that sense, the company is mitigating the risk of someone having access to the new joiners workstation accounts or whatever, right? And making sure that only the appropriate person or only that person gets the access after they have joined the firm, right? Now, in general sense speaking, now, like I said, that the person should have access only, on and after 16th of March, and the account could have been created and approval would have been on 11th of March from the relevant business people and the HR team and whatnot. However, when the person gets the laptop or the account on 16th of March, they would be able to log in on that particular day, on and after that particular day, nothing before that, right? Now, how do we bring this to action, right? When it comes to the actual audit, when it comes to the actual testing of field work, right, or whatever term that we might want to call, when it comes to that, how do we look out for those, right? How do we test that? How do we say that, company is doing good in terms of user access creation and there's no risk associated with that? Now, in terms of that, we've got some, now this is called testing work paper, right? And we have got some key aspect to be recorded here, right? And this is like an, if you will, this is like an audit sheet wherein we go through each, we fill out each areas. Again, when it comes to the audit side of things, these admin work is really important because this gets recorded as part of formal documentation. And if the regulator asks for that, on what basis have you sort of passed the audit, or have you sort of said that the control is working effectively, this is what would be presented to the regulators and legal authorities and whatnot, right? When I said this, what I mean is something like this, what whosoever the auditor is, right? Now, I'll probably simply start with the entity name, what was the audit date, what was the effective conclusion. So it could be effective or ineffective, whatever it may be, right? Whatever it may be. So for the sake of argument, let's just say that the control is effective. And again, this is something that would be filled out after we have completed our testing and after we have completed everything, right? Then we say that, what is my control description? Again, people who doesn't really know what a control is, you can, look back after this session what a control is, and then it will start to make sense. So we say that, what the control is. So the control is to verify the creation of user accounts, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Testing is applicable to users of the Active Directory network and in scope application, right? This is really important. Understanding the scope, and I'm very much emphasized on scope of the testing or scope of the application, which becomes our base for pretty much everything, right? So it's really important to understand that what systems are in scope. And then we talk about, what is the high-level process of this particular control. So it's access management. What is the frequency? What is the frequency of this control? Now, when I say frequency of this control, does this control occur on a periodic basis? So say on a quarterly basis, on a semi-annual basis, on a daily basis. So this will be ad hoc because there's no periodicity of the employees joining as a new starter with the firm, right? So there's no periodicity attached to it. It would be rather on an ad hoc basis or as on when basis. So we say that the frequency of this particular control is on ad hoc basis, right? The audit period, again, pretty standard, that what is the look back period that we are testing, right? And then we say that what is the population source, as in what is the source of information that we talk about, right? Now this is very critical. When we talk about population size and sample and the audit, it links back to something called audit methodology, right? And that's a different topic altogether. Audit methodology, that's a different topic altogether, and it's really critical that we follow a set standard of audit methodology when we are actually doing the audit and testing any control, right? And this is a different topic altogether. You can obviously go back and look up these terminologies, like your population, your sample size, and yada yada yada. You can look through those terminologies after this session, right? But for the sake of argument, let's just say that you're testing for one of the employees. You have picked one random new starter to see that whether or not they were given access in a timely manner, and has the company been following their own policies that they have set out to mitigate the risk related to the access, right? So again, sample selection is it's a different story altogether. I can cover this in another session when I take very specific to audit methodology. Where I can take on that. Now, say that I have picked one random sample, right? One random employee or new starter from the last 1 year to verify that their access was provided in a timely manner and that the company is, been following what they are saying in terms of process and sort of, leading to mitigating the risk, right? So I take the sample here. I'll probably zoom in a little. So I'll probably take the sample. I'll assign a unique sample ID to that. I'll mention what is the employee ID. So assuming that I am a new employee, I'll provide my own employee ID. I say who was the employee here. So I was the employee who requested. It's Pranay. So say that he requested that this particular employee, or in this case me, Atul should be given access. Others should be given access to a certain application, right? And it was granted by someone else, right? What is the role of the employee? So say that if I'm a network administrator or an admin at Office 365 admin, so I'll just mention here that he is a O365 admin. And what is the level of access that I should be given, right? Now, these are two different things. So this is the role that I'm coming in. So I'm coming in as an administrator, like literally the title of my role. And when it comes to the level of access, what is the level of privilege access that I would need to have into a certain application, right? So I would be mentioning all the details here. Now that these are the details that you would see that that gets captured, from, you can have these details captured from the HR team as well, right? You can definitely get these level of details from the HR, right? What we would need to do after that is to understand that what was my date of joining. So what I'll do here is I'll probably move the cell a little bit here. And what I'll say is my date of joining, right? My date of joining, like in my previous example, I was joining around 16th of March 2024, right? So what I'll say that this person joined on 16th of March 2024, and then I would have certain attributes to test against, right? Now say that based on my audit methodology and sampling methodology and yada yada yada, I don't only have one employee here. I mean, I don't really have one sample here. I've got n number of samples in here, right? Say that I've got another 6 or another 20, right? Whatever it is, right? I will have to test again. I'll have to test these attributes against each employees, and then I can have comfort, or then we can, as an auditor or as a professional, we can comfortably say that the company has been consistently applying the same level of controls and sort of processes and a number of other things across all the employees, right? And again, you have certain limitations. What if the samples that you pick has been following the process, but there could be samples which is missed and does not follow the process. So there's always a limited assurance sort of risk in there, right? All right, coming back to the point, we have got certain attributes in here. So what I say here is that I'll go through one by one, right? So the first attribute says that the user request was made by either the employee in question or the appropriate staff member, right? Now, here it was requested by appropriate staff members, so say that my manager requested the access for me because I'm a new joiner. The second attribute is that the request was appropriately authorized. So yes, it was authorized by my manager. So we will assume that the access was authorized appropriately. The next attribute is a request was made prior to access being granted. Again, if the access is granted on 16th of March 2024, doesn't mean that, I mean, it would not really make sense that, if the approval would have come on 18th, right? It has to be made before 16th of March 2024, right? So making sure that we know that when did the request was approved, right? So after date of joining, I would just say approval date, right? And I'll just plug in random dates in here. So I would say that the approved date was 12th of March 2024, right? The next one is that access requested and access assigned are on the same level, right? Now for this, I'll have to look out for the person's role. What was the person's role? And what is the level of access that they would need, right? And then, I'd go ahead and say that, yes, they would provide the appropriate level of access. The last one is that access is provided as per the job role, right? Job role, and I would rather add responsibilities, right? So what I would say that access was provided as per the job role and responsibilities, right? Now, for every samples that you see here, for every sample, I would, what I'll do is I'll list out the attributes here. So I have labeled each of the attributes here, if you see. So A to E, A, B, C, D, E, and I've got 5 attributes in here. What I'll do is I'll sort of plug in all the attributes in here, and I'll say that yes, they are ticking the box for each of the attributes that's defined. And I would say that this particular sample was effective. Now, once I say that, for other 20 samples or 15 samples or whatever it is, right? If it is effective, I'll go ahead and say that this particular control is effective. Now, this is completely from an audit perspective, right? When it comes to implementation, what you would see here is that, and what we have been talking, and you would see that I'm referring to your company policy, right? Now, when it comes to implementation, we need to make sure that we have got the right company policy in place, right? We have got the access control policy, which really talks in depth about what is the access creation process, who should be approving, who should be granting the access. Um, do we have the appropriate segregation of duties in place? Are we doing user access review and yada yada yada? A number of other things that we saw a few minutes back under access control management, right? Now, once we have the company policy, we need to make sure that companies adhering to this policy on a day-to-day basis, right? Because if we don't do, we are sort of not operating over a period of time, right? Now, what I say that once I've defined the company policy related to the access control, I'll go ahead and train people, right? So the next important stuff, or the next important bit, is to train. It's training, right? It's training the people. It's training people across the board. Now, when I say across the board, what I mean is that obviously the administrator would require the training, one. Second, people who are approving and requesting the access also need training, that where to request, right? Is it over email? Is it over an ITSM tool, or whatever it is, right? So they would need to know that how to approve, what to approve, and why exactly are we approving? Why is it important? What risks are mitigated, and a number of other things, right? So it's really important to train our people to understand that we are sort of mitigating a certain risk with this particular process, and also being compliant with any regulatory application or legal obligations in general, right? Um, from an implementation perspective, the other part is implementing the control itself. So when I say control itself, for the argument, for the sake of argument, let's just talk about access creation. This is one of the controls. So I'm implementing this particular control in my organization as per my company policy. So this is how an implementation would look like from a practical perspective. So yeah, from an ITGC perspective, I think this is why we are doing, and this is how we do from an audit perspective. This is how we implement from an implementation perspective, and then we sort of touched on each of those components of ITGC, to that what are the different components, and sort of we deep dive into one of them.